Call this meeting of the School Board, Independent School District 624 to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Scar.
Here.
Scrifoji.
Here.
Thompson. Here. Arcan.
Here.
Beloit. Here. Daniels here.
All right, our first item tonight is B1. Mr. Wall, the fiscal year 2023-24 annual audit report.
Thank you. Annually, the district contracts with our public auditing firm of Malloy, Montague, Karnowski, and Radosevich and Company, MMKR, to complete the annual audit for the school district finances for the previous year. Throughout the spring, well, throughout mostly the summer and fall, auditors from MMKR work with the accounting staff at Wiper Lake Finance Department. Andy, our Director of Finance, Andy Johnson, leads that team working with the auditors to prepare for the annual audit. Tonight we have Jim Eichten, who is a managing partner at MMKR, and he's been with us for a lot of years in White Bear Lake. And welcome you, Jim, to another school board meeting.
All right, thank you.
Jim will present the annual audit report.
All right. Well, thanks for the introduction, Superintendent, members of the board. My name is Jim Eichten. I'm going to jump right into some clarifying items of that presentation. Some of you are aware of this, but as of January 1st, which was 20 days ago, my firm of MMKR did actually merge with a different firm. We are a firm called L.B. Carlson as of that date. All of my auditors and partners are moved to that particular firm. So we don't anticipate any changes in the way we operate and the way we do things, but it is important to understand that I'm representing MMKR because I did issue this report under MMKR, even though I'm really L.B. Carlson at this particular moment. I think, here we go. Am I good to go? There it is. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to quickly go through the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll probably reference some of the other documentation that I have here. So it is a requirement, as mentioned, that the district have an annual financial statement prepared. That particular annual financial statement requirement, the district takes to another level and prepares what's called an annual comprehensive financial report, an ACFR, which is submitted for recognition by certificate of review programs. That particular document, if you haven't looked at it, is about 152 pages long. There's a lot of data in that particular report that really is prepared by the district and does get recognized for Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. As part of the particular audit, we do implement any sort of new standards that are required to be implemented. This particular year, we did implement a standard on group capital assets, which I'll touch on a little bit during a later presentation. And then, so for purposes of this audit, we are also required to, as part of our particular requirements, audit the internal controls over the district's financial reporting. That would include many various aspects, but mostly things like payroll and cash receipts, cash disbursements, those types of things. Okay. So my audit results are also summarized in a document that's called the management report, and I believe the document was provided to you. That particular management report does go through the audit results for purposes of really purposes of reviewing a much less lengthy document and getting an idea on how the audit results went. And I'm going to go through that particular document, not in full, but touch on the highlights as it relates to the audit. So in that document, I did provide a summary of the audit results, and as I mentioned, the annual comprehensive financial report, we did issue what's called an unmodified opinion. That was a clean opinion on that particular financial statement. It's the opinion you were looking for going in. We did implement that group audit standard as mentioned. It did impact the district's financial results in slightly, added some capital assets, specifically those that were purchased in a group setting, which is what the standard required us to implement. I did mention the internal controls over financial reporting. We did have one audit adjustment this year that is reported as a finding specifically related to the recording of I will call it construction in process. As you all are aware, there is a significant volume of transactions happening in this particular environment, given the amount of construction happening. And the accounting specifically related to capital asset record keeping and the continuing accounting for construction process was reevaluated, if you will, this year. We did find some adjustments that got recorded as part of the audit particular process. I think it's important to understand that the finding specifically relates to what I would call financial reporting finding, the day-to-day aspects of payment of bills and the reviewing of invoices and the payment and overviewing of contracts was not the finding that we have here. That was all found to be adequate and appropriate. In this case, it mostly, in fact, if not all of it, related to the accounting and the wrapping up of the audit in terms of how that relates to capital assets and the recording of those. And that's a significant differentiation when I look at that particular finding. The audit results of this particular page, I did mention, or previously mentioned, we do audit your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations as part of this audit. It's required by the Office of the State Auditor. They provide us with a list of all the laws they want us to audit. The list changes depending on their needs and what they find at their audits that are causing findings at school districts. We did not have any findings to report in that particular space. As part of the audit, we also audit your schedule of expenditures of federal awards, what's called a CFA. The district does receive a significant amount of federal awards, and as a result, the federal government requires us to complete what's called a single audit. The total federal awards this year was about $7.6 million. You can see we also audit your internal controls over those particular grants. We also audit the compliance with those particular grants, which are described as major programs. We don't audit every program in that federal space. There's a rotating process going on. And so depending on the major program, we test the compliance of each individual major programs really on a rotating basis based on federal rules. In that particular summary of those three particular areas, we didn't have any findings to report. Continuing on, it is an important element of a particular finding of an audit to follow up any prior year findings. I'll describe it this way. We are here to audit, and because of that, we find things. It's a learning experience. It's part of the process to learn and find things and improve on them. We don't actually have everything that we found in this process. Some of the things that we learned as part of this process were just communicated to staff. They weren't significant enough to actually put it in a report. But there's a lot of things we find and ask about that are just, hey, maybe the best practice here is to do it this way. But for those findings, particularly the one on construction process, there is a finding written. There's a corrective action plan. And as a board, you should be focused on that particular element of the finding. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to correct it so that the auditor doesn't have this finding again next year? So that particular finding, corrective action plan, you'll see in some of the data that you've received. We've talked about it as far as in our exit meeting about how we're going to go about improving that particular accounting so that it doesn't happen. There was some turnover in district staff in that space during our audit year, which is probably primarily the reason for some of that, for that finding. But that being said, how are we going to correct it? And there is a corrective action plan. So when I look at last year, there were 2 findings, and both of those findings were eliminated. The result that we would hope for as a board. Yep, we wrote those findings, we had those findings, we made a corrective action, here we are presenting the next year, and they've been corrected. I believe they're listed up there. They related to collateral on the district's bank accounts, as well as advertisement for bids in one particular contract last year. So I'm going to continue in my presentation. Hopefully I don't go too fast, which I just did. There we go. My management report does then go into what I would call the second part of the audit results, specifically related to the district's financial results collectively. And the report goes over almost every fund, if not every fund, but it really starts with some comparable data from the state. This particular graphic presentation, which is on page 6 of my report, shows statewide operating fund balances as a percentage of expenditures using MDE's formula, not the district's formula, the MDE's formula. Very important distinction. You can see on that particular graph, fund balances statewide have been about 20% for almost a decade. That's a number that has been very consistent. Prior to the pandemic, you can see that number was very, very solid. Until we got to the pandemic, actually fund balances went up statewide, mostly related to changes in operations. Spending patterns were much different. More funding became available from federal grants, those types of things. Once we got post-pandemic, you can see in the yellow graph started to go down as federal money became less available, student populations declined a bit, and just the change in operations made that occur. We anticipate, at least I do anticipate by the number of audits that I do, that yellow line is going to continue to go down. When we get here next year, you'll see that. The district's fund balances there, you can see, are in red. Most of the early years relate to very, very planful spending of some additional resources that came from the OPEB Trust Fund back in probably, what year was it? 2014? 14? Yes, 1 year off of that graph. And since 2014, there's been a consistent spend down that is very planful to the point where we got to 2019, 2020. For 2024, the year that I audited, you can see that there was an increase in fund balance as a percentage of expenditures on the statewide level after a couple of declining years the past 2 years. And I'll get to these more specific general fund data in a later graph. This particular graph on page 7 of my report shows revenues per student. It does show information for the district on the right, and then it shows statewide metro area averages as well. What that's stating there is in 2024, the district spent $22,206 per student. Excuse me, they have revenue of $22,206 per student in that particular year. Some of the things that stand out in that particular revenue category, there was some significant increases in state funding. You can see at the state line for both the basic formula allowance, which increased this past year, but also in special education formulas and special education programming shows up. You can see the impact the bond issues have had on debt service fund showing up in the bottom line there. You can see the debt service fund revenues being increased over last year based on new bond issues. Revenues in the food service fund actually increased pretty significantly, and most of that, if not all of it, relates to the additional state funding that came to you for free meals, the free meal program. You can really see it showing up in that particular area. Lastly, the federal line has been going down. Most of the pandemic-related funding that came out of that particular time frame has declined as you use them and they just don't replenish. Many districts are struggling with that as federal funds have gone away. Some of their the financial impact is hitting them pretty hard. So you can see some of the trend lines there. On the expenditure side, you can see this is expenditures per student again. So in total, in the governmental funds of the district, you're spending about $21,633 per student, which is reflected in this particular graph. Some of the areas that stood out, you can see that regular instruction is a pretty big or large category there, $6,799 in regular instruction. There was some increases in that particular category for curriculum purchases. One-time curriculum purchases are in that particular category. Special education is also increasing due to just continued increased cost, both for salaries, benefits, really purchase services are also in there when you're utilizing other staffing methodologies. And then lastly, the debt service fund the bottom there stands out in terms of the additional debt service funding, or excuse me, expenditures that are happening further down in referendum and the like. Continuing on, the general fund financial position is on page 9, which is this particular page gets into the individual by individual fund analysis. This graph shows the general fund financial position utilizing cash and fund balance as indication of equity position, where you're standing from an equity position. And then expenditures really just trying to reflect how the changing size of the operation, if you're getting bigger or smaller, which really you're seeing a slight increase over the time frame noted, but pretty slight overall. At the end of the year, the district's fund balance did increase about 2.6 million. That particular fund balance increase was roughly 931,000 above what was projected for the year. So very close to expectations. The operations, your district is running a general fund that is what, about $142 million operation in total. I mean, it's a pretty sizable organization when you think about it just for that one fund. And you came in, your end of the year, you came in within 930,000 of those budgeted expectations. There was a balance there. Revenues were higher than projections, as well as expenditures were higher than projection, but the net was about 900,000 for the year. This particular graph, which is on the next page, is probably the most important part of this presentation, showing some benchmarking in terms of decision-making on the part of the board. At the end of the year, the district's fund balances as a percentage of expenditures using the district's calculations ended the year at 7.5%. It was an increase from 5.9% the year before. Why is that important? Well, the district does have a fund balance policy in place. The board has adopted such a policy. The policy strives to maintain a minimum unassigned fund balance of 8%. And that's important. That's a very important benchmark that up here. I see some shaking of heads. That's a place that you should focus your attention as a board member, both from just a standpoint of understanding what that policy is all about, but also at the end of the year, utilizing that percentage to say, well, either we need to adopt a change in our budget going forward, or just understanding where we are from a baseline perspective. So at the end of the year, the unassigned fund balance, like I said, is at 7.5%, just slightly below that particular policy that you have in place. Some might ask me, well, now what? What are we going to do once we know that fund balance policy? Well, that's up to the superintendent and the business office to make some understanding how that impacts the overall budget going forward. That's not my job. I'm here to reflect on the audit results. Most of the administration will bring that forth to you in future meetings if they haven't already, maybe even at the last meeting it was addressed. Continuing on, we do have some reflected information here as well on general fund revenues and expenditures. The next one's expenditures. The general fund revenues, as mentioned, we're over budget by about 3.8 million. There's three categories that stand out to me. Other revenues were conservatively budgeted. There were some other revenues from billings to other districts that impacted that particular revenues. Tax collections were better than expected. Typically you see that because there's usually a built-in contingency in collections. You never know how collections are going to be on a tax perspective. And then overall, state sources were over budget based on just approved funding in those two particular categories, including transportation. On the expenditure side, we did have expenditures over budget this year by about 3.3 million. Three categories that again stand out: supplies and materials, specifically related to a one-time curriculum purchase that I already referenced. That was the district taking advantage of some pricing for a particular curriculum materials that weren't in original budget, but felt like it was important to buy that just to take advantage of the pricing in that particular area. Salaries were over budget by about $800,000. Most of that, which was actually very close to budget given the size of that particular category. And then lastly, purchase services for things like student tuition billing and transportation were more than budgeted this past year. But all in all, like I said, the overall budget was very close to expectations when you get to within $1 million net. You're doing a good job of doing those budget expectations and holding the audit true to some of those expectations. I will continue on, and I will follow up with questions that people have when I get done. This particular page is 14, shows the other governmental funds of the district. Food service fund, as shown here, did increase to a fund balance of about $3 million. Most districts' food service funds financial results were better than expected, given the new funding that's coming from the state. You're no different in that particular case. You're seeing food service fund increasing fund balance this past year. You're at about 46% fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, which is a good place to be when it comes to the food service fund. You can see the community service fund, I would suggest, is not where it needs to be. Nobody wants to see a deficit fund balance in the community service fund. It was better than expected by about $150,000, so it could have been worse. There was some increased participation for school-age care as well as youth enrichment programs that helped that fund. We did talk at the exit conference, if you will, or some of the things that are ongoing and happening to improve that particular fund and turn that around so that we have some fund balance going forward. But at the end of the year, it sits at about a deficit of about $322,000. Let's see how I go here. Yep. Now I'm just pressing buttons to press buttons. All right. Continuing on my presentation, the district does have a very healthy fund in an internal service fund, which is really a self-insurance fund. The district is self-insured for health benefits, and an internal service fund is utilized to fund that particular program. In 2024, you can see that the fund did increase by about $800,000. As you can see in revenues, it's about $15 million of revenues in that particular fund for health benefits. At the end of the year, that particular fund is at about 33% of operations. I believe the experts in this particular area would be hope for something closer to 50%. And I know that you're working to improve that particular area, as you can see in the improvement for this past year. Other funds the district has, you have a capital project building construction fund. This past year, there was about $71 million of spending in that particular one fund or utilization. Why I bring that number to the forefront is mainly related to my observations of the work that's happening in the business office. You don't take a general operation, you don't take a district office and move from a spending of zero, really generally, and that's probably exaggerating, but from 0 to 771 million and not expect there to be impact. There's a lot of work that goes into processing all of that particular work. And to process that, it takes personnel and resources, and sometimes you don't have it, and other times you do, but it does have an impact on the district, and is something that should be recognized because it's probably going to go away eventually, right? Continuing on, you have the debt service fund as mentioned. I mentioned that there is a self-benefits dental plan, which is sitting in good financial position. And the district also has what's called an OPEB trust fund. That particular trust fund was issued some time ago, where bonds were issued to finance the OPEB trust obligations of the district. At the end of the year, the district has about $31 million sitting in trust for future obligations in the OPEB area. I think that's the end of my presentation. So in summary, I was able to issue an unmodified opinion, as mentioned on that financial report. We implemented the capital asset accounting standard this particular year. We've issued a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting, which will take some time to receive from the organization. We did have the one finding, which ultimately will hopefully be corrected in the future. You're seeing improving general fund financial position. I did mention the importance of the district's fund balance policy as a guideline for decision-making on the part of administration and the board. I did analyze all the other funds as I went through, talked a little bit about the significance of the construction activity. And then lastly, I just want to reflect on the audit process. The audit process for us starts in June and really ends probably in December. It's a long process, especially at a district of this size. It takes a lot of effort by auditors as well as administration. And my words there are very to point. This district is very dedicated to this process. Rarely do I not get the information that I need. And if I'm not getting the information I need, I'm well aware why I haven't received it yet, because somebody's working on it. So it's a very healthy process, healthy from two fronts, healthy for me as an auditor, but healthy for the district as well. There are people that are dedicated to this process and making sure it goes right and is effective as well. So with that, I'll open it up to questions that you have for me on the audit results.
I'm looking for, I know, Ms. Beloy, you had a question?
Excuse me. What would you say is one of the, in all the times you've been doing this, a red flag for anybody when they're looking through the financials to say that something is off? What would be one of the...
Talking about now or forever?
Forever. I mean, anytime we're looking at budgets this large,
Yeah.
I mean, what are the red flags to look for if something is off?
Yeah, generally, we as a firm immediately get concerned with turnover. Turnover in personnel is a huge challenge. And I'll just probably talk about the last maybe 3 years to 4 years, post-pandemic probably. Very tight available resources outside of in the finance world, both in the audit world, but also in the business manager world. Whenever there's somebody leaves a district or leaves a hole, it's very hard to replace that person. And your district has been, I will say, at times impacted by that. There was an opening as a controller position at one time, if I remember. That was a couple years ago, roughly. And you can see it. You can almost see it. You can feel it almost in the district when you talk to the personnel here. They're just, things slow down. Things aren't moving as quickly as they should. And so whenever you see open positions at a district, you should be aware of it and help, or, help to understand what's happening. This year, there was, like I mentioned, basically the construction account. Is that right? Yeah. There was an opening in that particular area, and somebody else had to take over. Well, transition means things slow down, there's a change in understanding, and it leads to things that are cause of concern. Are they red flags? Probably not in this case, but they can be.
Were there any, this audit was completed on time, correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was submitted.
Is that a red flag to look for if audits go beyond their due-by dates?
A red flag, no, but it is something to be concerned about, in terms of trying to get them back on track and get them done timely, for sure. But I wouldn't define it as a red flag. Sometimes there's just things that happen that cause it, and it has nothing to do with, something concerning.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Scar?
Thank you. So, are schools subject to partner rotation?
In particular on an audit,
Right.
they're not.
They're not?
No.
So how long have you been partner for White Bear School?
I've been the partner for some time. I probably came in a severe financial crisis, whenever that was. We talked about it. I remember that. Ted Blazing era, for sure. I'd have to get.
So there's no partner rotation required for school districts for an audit company?
There are not.
Okay.
If requested, we certainly adapt for that
Does the
and
firm that
provide it.
you merged with, do they have partner rotation requirements?
They do.
Okay. Maybe before, I wanted to circle back maybe on the nature of the findings from this year as well as last year's. but I've got some nits on the report. Can I go through that? That's okay, it won't take that long.
How many questions?
Pardon me?
You just got a few questions?
Well, if you go to,
If we can keep it brief, yes.
well, if you go to page 26 out of 260, this is the annual comprehensive report. It says the district has adopted a 4-way equity decision-making protocol. It only lists 3 questions there. In the paragraph under that, it says in comparison with other school districts in the state, the district ranks high in its educational programs and its scholastic abilities of its graduates, which I think is great, but are we grounded in any kind of a statistic with that? I don't mind if it's bold, but I just thought maybe there should be something grounded in that.
And I'm wondering if those are questions about the audit, or those are questions,
Well,
that's what I'm thinking is,
well, do we want, you know,
With it-
this is to the public, so we want it to be accurate. And
Yeah.
we want it to be grounded in, you know, accuracy, right?
yeah, I just want to make sure that we're questioning about the audit, not something above and beyond.
Well, this is embedded in the
Okay.
audit report,
Okay.
that annual comprehensive report. So I want to also on page, I think it's on the same page, 26, it talks about after a drop in enrollment caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, district enrollment has stabilized. But then if you go back down to page 27, it says the bond funding will be used to address projected enrollment growth throughout the district. So I think that language there, if you can clean that up a little bit, so it kind of is saying, you know, at what you're saying, it's declined and stabilized, and then at the other end, you're saying, hey, the bond funding was used to, you know, for an increase, so that would leave a question in my mind if I'm the reviewer of that.
Can I get a clarification on what that means?
So for the, so I think when we're talking about the projected enrollment growth, we're thinking more about long-term projected enrollment growth, and that's certainly was the, we certainly did project enrollment growth when we went out for the bond. So I think that's kind of why that's in there in that way.
Right. Well, I would suggest you either remove it or explain why
Sure. Understood.
the bond, we projected this, and now we're at this. So we either have to explain it or I would suggest it. These are just friendly suggestions. I would say on page 28 of 260, it says, as demonstrated by the statements and schedules, including the financial section, blah, 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 the district continues to meet its responsibility of sound financial management. And I would just say, you know, that's great to self-proclaim that, but I think you could say meet its responsibility for financial management, and we believe our procedures are sound, something like that. If you go to page 50 of 260. No, we can skip that one. 54. I think this, you have the address as the old address for the school district. You should probably update that.
No, that was the address at the time of the audit, so that's the.
Oh, but it says if you have questions, you're
Yeah.
supposed to follow that. So that's just a little bit confusing. I wanted to ask you about that debt. It's on page 178, 260. It has to do with the debt limit. Based upon the market value. That, how does that, you know, you guys calculate that, or is that something that the district calculates?
The district would calculate that.
And then you look at that?
I mean, we look at it to validate that the calculation was done correctly, sure.
I thought that was good.
And the debt limit's in statute, if I,
Yeah.
the district doesn't really come up with the debt limit, it's in statute.
One other one had to do with that 37 million, but we had obligations of like 78 million, and so we're upside down on the funding, but that's probably typical, I'm thinking. Is that true?
You're talking about the OPEB
Yeah.
trust fund?
Yeah, we have assets of 37 million, but our obligations are like 78 or 80 million. I think it's on page 229 of the book. If you go to that, it's your note number 8 to the financials.
So the OPEB trust fund, based on right now, the total OPEB liability is 13 million, where the assets are 31 million. So you're not upside down, you're actually to the
No, I'm
good.
thinking of some- There's another one that.
Right.
Let me just. Was that in note 8?
That was in note 8, yes.
Mr. Scar, while you're looking for that, can I open it up to other board members with questions?
And then if you could circle back.
I will. Any other questions?
I just had one, just for my
Sure.
clarification. On one slide, it talked about the unrestricted operating fund balance, and that's 9.6. And what's the difference between that and the unassigned, which is 7.5, which is the one we always are, with our policy? So one was slide 8, and one was
Yes.
slide 10. I just wanted to know.
Great
the
question. Yeah, so the slide that we're utilizing was 9.6, is the state of Minnesota's calculation. So the state of Minnesota, the Department of Education, uses the calculation of fund balance as a percentage of expenditures for their own internal use. Most notably, they use it for statutory operating debt calculations. So when districts fall below 0 and get to 2.5%, I think is the number now, you're considered in statutory operating debt. So you're far from that, but that's their calculation, utilizing the Department of Education's calculation. The calculations that are on page 10 are district calculations, and using your own fund balance policy. So we're taking certain fund balance categories and comparing them to certain expenditures to come up with a district calculation. So they differ. You might ask yourself, does every district do it that way? They do. Every district has their own fund balance policy and their own calculations that fit their district. And so there are 2 different calculations on pretty much every district that I work with.
Thank you.
Great question.
Other questions? Okay, Mr. Scar, have you found your?
Yeah, no issues, I just read it wrong. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
All right.
No problem.
Getting back to the material weakness, since there's a lot of capital transactions, what was the nature of it? Was it a classification issue?
So what we're doing with the construction process is when you're accounting for capital assets in this particular financial report, first of all, capital expenditures, when paid, are expensed in the fund. So they get expensed in the fund, they get recorded as an expenditure. In the financial report, we convert that particular expenditure into a capital asset accounting, into capital asset using, trying to get simple here, but they have a separate set of financials called the entity-wide financial statements that account for capital assets, right? So in the capital asset record keeping, the district is calculating construction in process. So you do that because anytime there's a contract that goes, or a contract or a project that goes multiple years, you don't want to capitalize that particular contract until it's complete, correct? So any contract that's multiple years, they calculate or use a spreadsheet to summarize all the construction in process, right? That particular spreadsheet, when we analyzed the beginning balance, which would have been kind of a roll forward from last year, and we started comparing them to the accounting records, we noticed ones that weren't consistent, that didn't seem, they were off based on this year's spreadsheet. So last year's spreadsheet didn't necessarily mimic with this year's spreadsheet. So we did some analysis to determine, well, where are we off? What contracts got off? Why is last year's different than this year's? And we came up with and noted some adjustments. So we made those adjustments.
So the internal control weakness was related to reporting, not actually scoring the numbers and reviewing the numbers, things like that, or the invoices.
It had nothing to do with payments out to contractors at all. It had to do with internal accounting of,
Did the auditors look at change order process?
we did not. I mean, we didn't, that's,
So on the prior year finding with the, where you didn't post bid, did anybody complain about it, or was it just a finding that you found? No complaints, so there's no harm really? Right, all right, that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for always.
Thank you.
excited. At least some of us are always excited to have you come here with this information.
Yep.
I know this side of the table is, and I appreciate you taking your time to
Thank
provide
you.
it with us.
thank you.
Yeah, and I also just want to underscore what Mr. Eichten said about the heavy lift in the finance office with the construction, just managing the construction fund, and the pressure on our accounts to just stay on top of all that. It's really been a heavy lift, and really kudos to Andy Johnson, who supervises all that very closely, does a great job with it. So thanks for your work, Andy, as well as Sarah Andre, who is our controller and new to public accounting, so she came from the corporate world and then moving into public education. Public accounting is a really heavy lift. She's doing great work, big learning curve. And then Stephanie Wendell, also an accountant, who's been doing great work. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We're going to go on now to discussion item B2, Dr. Kazmierczak.
All right, I'd like to welcome Peter Leatherman. Come on up, Peter. Peter conducted a community survey for us back in December, and he's here to share the results with us. So, Peter, take it away.
Super.
Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. In my 31st year, I've heard hundreds of those auditors' reports, and I still don't understand education funding. God bless you. So I'm waiting for it to pop up.
Arrow right.
Perfect. All right, to review with everybody what we undertook with the district. We spoke with 400 randomly selected residents across the community. And then within that sample, there's a percent of parents. We had 30% parents. So you have approximately 120 parents in that 400 sample. So I called an additional 280 parents. I pull out that 120, put that together. So now we have a sample to look at parents. That's also 400. 400 samples projectable to within plus or minus 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. Once again, the margin of error is determined by the size of the sample, not the percent of the population. So a 400 in White Bear Lake School District, a 400 in Ramsey County, or a 400 in the state of Minnesota is plus or minus 5%. Interviews were conducted last year before the holidays between the 3rd and 19th. Average interview time was 12 minutes. People were thrilled we were past the election and nobody was voter IDing them, so they were more than happy to talk. Refusal rate was only 6%. And to put up some demographics, we always start cell phone only, 59%. 8%, they still exist out there, are landline only households, and then the remaining third have both landlines and cell phones. Continuing with the demographics, and the demographics are, of course, two purposes. First off, we want to validate the sample on key demographics, whether households with children, households with seniors, homeowners versus renters, those sorts of factors. But then we can look at statistically significant differences between groups. The typical resident has lived in the school district for about 12 years. You have 41% that are 10 years or less. Well, you have 36% that have been in the district for over 20 years. You have a large group of settlers and newbies, we call them. Part of it is obviously the growth on the north side of the school district. 15% indicate that they have a preschooler or an infant. 30% have a child attending the White Bear Lake Area School District, and 68% are empty nesters. Once again, empty nester does not imply an age, it's lack of presence of a child. So it could have a 24-year-old in here. For the purpose of the survey, it's there, an empty nester. So your core constituency is about a third of the population. 45% have a relative attending the White Bear Lake Area School District. 17% are renters. Self-assessed home value, 29% at under 250K, 27% at 250 to 350K, and then 26% are over $350,000 homes. Continuing with the demographics, the typical resident's about 46 years old, with 25% 18 to 34-year-olds and 34% over the age of 55. Just short of a majority of folks are college graduates. That includes postgraduates at 48%. 22% are high school graduates or less, and 30% have some college experience. The key factor for districts over the past 2 years looking at funding requests is the financial situation of the household. The financially stressed in your district is the same that we have in the fourth quarter of 24, right at about 45%. It has come down. The high since the pandemic was in the first quarter of 23, where we had almost 60% across the state of Minnesota indicating they were financially stressed. So it has backed down. You're right at, excuse me, right at the norm. But to give you a historical indicator, before the pandemic, the norm was about 26%. So we're still about 20 points higher. And
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
The norm before the pandemic was about 26%. So we're still about 20 points higher than what we were historically before the pandemic. And part of it is, the pandemic, even in 20 and 21, we didn't get the increase in financially stressed. The recession of 2008, 2009, we got to about 65% financially stressed. By the winter of 2020, we were only at about 40% financially stressed. It was really odd. And when you own your own survey company, we do internal surveys. We went on and asked people. And folks were telling us, okay, yes, my income might have been impacted, but my expenses have been impacted. You weren't able to go on vacation. You weren't able to go to restaurants, all those sorts of things. So it didn't impact people until things went back to normal, where their income was no longer keeping up with their expenses once all of that discretionary spending was back in play for folks. And then finally, women outnumbered men by 4 points. And then you can see the geographic distribution. City of White Bear Lake, 35%, Hugo, 20%, 18% each in Badness and White Bear Township, and then 10% in the remainder of the district. So before I go on, I always ask, any questions on methodology, demographics?
Go ahead, Mrs. Gar.
Thank you. Where did you get your universe to sample from?
It's a database with every voter or every resident in the community, and then I just pull a random sample off of that.
Oh, so it's not something from the district?
No.
You get it off, okay.
Correct. Yep.
Who comes up with the questions?
It's developed with the school district.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, survey says, for the purpose of the presentation, I've put some data on from before the pandemic. Now keep in mind, it's an apples to oranges comparison, pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. But we can see some trends that we see everywhere. The overall quality of education of the public schools, you can see is at 86% this time. It was 81% back in 22. It's not statistically significant, but things are moving in the right direction. What we have seen consistently across the state since 23 is a drop on the quality of education. The norm before the pandemic was what you were at in 2019. You can see 90%. We're now down to an 80% norm. Okay, and the shift is not only gone from excellent to good, but from good to only fair. You don't have that in play here. You actually have the excellent rating going up. from 20 to 25%, which is a move in the right direction. That's where districts took a historical hit post-pandemic. The excellent rating currently is 11%, is the norm. So you're 2.5 times the norm on the excellent rating. You don't have the shift from good to only fair that a lot of districts have. So the challenge, the discussion in the district is how do you get people, you don't have to change people's minds that it's only fair and move them to good. The key is going to be more of how do we go from good to excellent again. Now, a couple open-ended questions. They can ask us anything, and we code them into categories. First off, what do folks like most? Teachers at the top of the list, 25%. If we combine some categories, though, if we look at variety of programs and broad curriculum, so we have 21% reacting to what is being taught in the classroom, and then we combine good academics, excellent academics at 22%, the quality. You basically have a statistical tie between those three. Who's teaching, what they're teaching, and the quality of the teaching. Now, some districts vary. Some are the focus is on curriculum, some it's on the academic quality, other it's personnel. Your folks historically have always been kind of equally distributed between those three categories. If we ask what they like most, we always follow up with the most serious issue. What leads the list? 20% say lack of funding. That's becoming the constant of pi. Somewhere between 18 and 22% across the state now are saying it's lack of funding. You have two other issues that hit double digits. High taxes at 12%, lack of discipline at 10%. The lack of discipline is typically somewhere around 8 to 10%. The high taxes, you're on the lower side. That has grown with property tax hostility since 23, where the norm as a top of the mind response is between 15 and 20% typically. So you're a little bit lower on that. We're going to go into taxes a little more in depth in a few charts. What other things come into play? Large class sizes, poor spending, declining quality. Scattered are idiosyncratic responses that are 1% or less that don't fit into any category. We just collapse them down. The key at the bottom of this chart, though, is the nothing, the 22%. These folks think there are no problems in this district. It's utopia. That is about 4 times the norm right now. The norm right now is dropped to 6%. Before the pandemic, it was 11. I just say before the pandemic all the time. Before the pandemic, though, it was 11 or 12%. It's been cut in half. So you do have, and these folks are positive throughout, whether we're looking at financial management, governance, administration, the quality. These are your boosters. So you do have a very large cell of boosters in the school district in comparison to most metro school districts. We talked about the shift over in the quality of education, but how about a historic comparison? And for this question, we ground it in comparison to 3 years ago, because it's not fair to tell them to ask to think back to 5 years ago before the pandemic. Do they think things are improving, getting better, stayed the same, or getting worse? Well, residents, it's 38 to 13 that things are getting better. Amongst parents, it's 37 to 9. So by a 3 to 1 and a 4 to 1 margin, you do have folks telling us that there are actually, though, things are moving in the right direction. They're getting better. The norm right now is 2 to 1. And there are some districts over the past 2 years where you have more people saying worse than better. You do have a sense of momentum that things are improving coming out. How does the district do on meeting the learning needs of all students? Most, only some, or very few. You're back to a majority saying you're meeting the learning needs of all students. And that's a real stringent standard to be held to, 53%. Norm on that has dropped down to about 44% over the past 3 to 4 years. So a very good rating. Now we followed up, I didn't put it in the chart, but we followed up with those that say most or some. and asks, is there a type of student whose learning needs are not being met? And you have the same array that districts have right now, and that is the struggling, the underachiever, and the average student is where the concern is at. How concerned are they about learning loss during the pandemic? You have 50% that are indicating they're either very or somewhat concerned, 48% not to or not at all. Pretty much what we're finding right now is this split on the perception of learning loss of coming out of the pandemic. If we look at intensity, it's about 50% higher of not at all concerned versus very concerned currently. What's the most important indicator of a high-quality education? For this, in the next few charts, we're going to look at your overall community versus the parents. And there is a lot of unity between the results of both. Oftentimes, there's a difference between parents and the community as a whole. But especially on this one, what's the most important? A broad curriculum serving all. Followed by college graduates going on for further education, reasonable numbers in classrooms, standardized test scores, and then technology at the bottom as a priority. Now, on standardized test scores, this has come back over the past 3 to 4 years. Quite frankly, it has to do with, it's the only touch point into a school district, especially for a non-parent, to judge a school district. Coming out of the years of George W. Bush and No Child Left Behind, people got testing exhaustion. And so it was not seen as a good measure. It's back, though, in the mix as something that people are looking at when they look at the quality of education in a school district. But you can see there really is a symbiosis here at the top 4 of what your community and your parents value. That's what they value. How do they rate the district on those indicators? Well, number 1 was the broad curriculum serving all. 77% favorable. Amongst parents, 85% favorable. College grads going on for further education, 79 and 87% favorable. Reasonable number in classrooms has the highest unfavorability. Now, reasonable number is in the eye of the beholder, okay? Oftentimes, in some districts, especially when we're looking at facilities for class size issues, we give them specific numbers to react to. So if you hear 25, is that too high, about the right amount? This one is just what's reasonable. What's reasonable to one person who grew up in small town Minnesota is very different than somebody who grew up in Maple Grove for a reasonable class size. And that's why there's such variation on this. But you can see parents are more satisfied than the community as a whole. Standardized test scores, 78 and 74%. The highest level is the least important, the state-of-the-art technology. So overall, it's very positive on all those indicators. General open-ended question, are they concerned about curriculum? A lot of discussion about curriculum over the past 3 years. Basically, you're what we find in the 7-county metro. About 75% have no concerns, 25% do have concerns. So the community, 72% say no, amongst parents, 74%. Following up with those that said they have a concern, you can see 2 liberal and gender identity tie, and then we go to LGBTQIA+, DEI, and then various scattered categories. But on this one, you're right at the norm that we see. Some specific perceptions that we've tested historically. First off, does the district spend taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? Unchanged from 22, 76% agree with the statement. Norm on that right now is about 59%. So you're about 17, 18 points higher than the norm on spending taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently. Do you ask for a tax increase only as a last resort? A little bit of a drop on this one. You've had funding requests over the past few years, but still 69% agree with that. The bottom question for districts looking at potential funding requests is really important, and that is the schools are a good investment, and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. The key on this is the no, because we're not telling them if it's an operating levy or a bond referendum, if it's $50 a month or $50 a year. The no are just against everything, and so that's the core opposition in the school district. You can see that's at 25%. Over the past 18 months, the norm has been about 30%, core no. It's gone up over the course of the last few years, which is why we've had so many unsuccessful funding requests from school districts. So you're on the low end of what we would see. Once again, this doesn't mean that people would be thrilled for a property tax increase. The lower the number, the more willingness there is to have a discussion about it. Continuing with statements. The schools are a good value for the investment? Absolutely. Unchanged, 89%. Does the district do a good job of involving the community? Unchanged. And this is unique because this took a hit with the pandemic. It was hard to involve the community for 2 years, in virtual or what have you. And you could see even in 22, it was very high at 78%. You're at 79% right now. Have you spent past referendum funds responsibly? 75%. Do they trust the district to do what's right for children? Back to where we were before the pandemic, 22 things had settled down. If you'd have done this survey in 20 or 21, it'd been very different because people were arguing about mask or virtual versus in-person, all of those things. But you've settled in at a better than 7-to-1 ratio on the trust issue, which is the norm on this right now is about 4-to-1. And then the satisfaction with the decision making. Here you can see the pandemic effect back in 22, still coming out, the trust and the decision making, but you've gone back now to 75% satisfied with the decision making. If we do look at some job performance ratings, the school board, 69-25, norm on school board right now is 58-40. On the administration, 71-25. On the administration, it's always a ratio that we're looking at. It's almost 3-to-1. The norm on district administration is 2-to-1. And then the closer you get to the kids, the higher the ratings. And we see that 75% on principals and teachers at 88%. The 88% on teachers is very strong. Teachers have taken a hit in ratings over the pandemic. The norm being before 90%, we're down to about 80%. So that 88% is very strong rating of teachers in your school district. I mentioned property taxes as a top of the mind, most serious issue, and that it was on the lower side. This question asks folks to think first about your total taxes and then your school taxes. On total taxes, 49% think they're high. You're one of the few districts that's actually below 50% saying my taxes are high. This has gone up, like I mentioned, with the new assessment in the spring of 23. Everybody was thrilled. Nobody realized what that would do to their tax statement in November of 23, and the norm went on my taxes are high to 60%. It came down a little bit. But now since November 15th of this year, it's going back up again. So you are on the low end at 49%. Now on school taxes, it actually drops to 44%. So this tells us that if they have animus on property taxes, it's not focused at the school district. That's great news. Bad news is you're really the only show in town that has to go to the public for a funding request. I always joke, back when I started doing this in the 90s, we always asked, who do you blame? And then cities and counties got really mad, and so we don't ask it that way anymore. We ask it this way, so it will tell us where the concern is focused at. It's not focused at you. So it's a tax-sensitive environment, not a tax-hostile environment. Is the district adequately funded? This is really interesting right now because we are getting very different results between the 7-county metro and the rest of Minnesota. For the most part of 23 and 24, it was 45% yes, 45% no, and 10% Don't know. What we're seeing now is a drop in the 7-county metro, and you have that. You only have 41% saying you're adequately funded, where the outstate norm is almost 60% saying, yes, we are adequately funded. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. We're going to do another internal survey that we'll share with school districts just to get a feel of what's happening around the state, but there is this bifurcation right now on the perception of the adequacy of funding on the schools. People are confused. They've heard the governor talk about the wonderful things that were done. They've heard the legislature do their victory laps. And then they see districts making cuts all over the place, and they don't know what to think right now. Overall assessment of financial management then, 64% favorable. Norm on this right now is 52%. So as we look at a whole with all the battery of questions we've asked around finances and spending, the district does have strong credibility when it comes to financial management with the community. If they heard the district was going to ask for a property tax increase, are they for all, against all, or are they persuadable? You actually have 3% more core support than core yes. So that's the highest that I have over the last 18 months. Where the norm over the last 18 months was -3% more opposition than core support. But obviously with these numbers, the vast majority are in the persuadable category. And that's where decisions will have to be made on funding requests in the future. On our let's make a deal question, what would be a reasonable tax increase to provide additional funding for the school district? Well, 24% say nothing. And we always want that number to be under 35%. So you're well under that number. Once again, this doesn't mean they support anything and everything. It means they're willing to have a conversation. 19% come in at $5, 23% come in at $10, and then we have 23% at $15 a month. The median, if we take out the nothing, they're not going to support anything. The typical residents at about $12 a month or $150 a year. For those that have heard me present for bond referendums out here or operating levies, you know, that number is not set in stone. It's based on, you know, it's not only this is the tolerance, but then what is the funding going to be used for? That could increase a dollar amount support, but it can also decrease depending on what's included in the funding request. Switching over to just the parent sample and getting a gauge on what parents are thinking. We went through a series of descriptions and asked, do they agree or disagree with the statements about the White Bear Lake Area School District? And on this one, I'll make this simple. There's vast agreement. The highest level of agreement you have with the statement is the district has excellent teachers at 95%. The lowest, excuse me, the lowest amount of agreement is preparing students for life and students succeeding at high levels at 86%. So very few parents are disagreeing with these statements. The opportunity for districts is to make parents feel strongly agreement on it, because there's a lot of soft agreement on this, because it's a four-part. They can strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. So once again, the challenge, and it's a challenge everywhere, is to bring more enthusiasm and to make people feel more intensely about what's happening in the schools. Of those descriptions, which is the most important description for the White Bear Lake Area School District? It's preparing students for life, followed by using effective teaching practices, students succeeding at high levels, support student needs, and partnering with families. The red is what is the least important. And you can see the pandemic has left a sour taste in everybody's mouth. You're not unique on technology. That is the least important option for the description about the White Bear Lake Area schools, especially for parents. They don't want to hear about technology unless it's in the classroom. What's the reason they sent their child to the school district? So they could tell us anything. We collapse them down into categories. You only have 2 items that hit double digits. So there's not really like one brand, shall we say, that's in the decision making. Close to home and the good teachers. If we combine kind of the location response, like my kids go here because we live here, you have close to home at 18%, live in the district at 9%, and family and friends at 10%, at 6%. So about a third are making a decision basically on convenience. That's a little bit lower. Most districts are in the 40 to 45% range. So you have more people making a decision on a value outside of just a demographic, shall we say. So good teachers, the programming, and then we also have down the list the curriculum, about 10% basing it on that. The quality of the education, whether it's high quality, the achievement stats, the reputation, the strong academics, about 15% in that category. So, once again, if you think back to what they like most, this kind of reflects it overall too on what parents are valuing, all three equally. Who's teaching, what they're teaching, and how well are they teaching it. A rating on characteristics of the district. Once again, they can say excellent, good, only fair, or poor. I've collapsed the excellent and good into the green and the only fair or poor into the red. You can see it's 76% or higher favorable across the board. With a high on the quality teaching staff at 94%. You actually have 4 other items that hit 90%. Extracurricular sports opportunities, the variety of course offerings, music, theater, arts, and access to technology. You then have a group in the high 80s. Academic achievement, basic academic coursework, character development, responsiveness to student needs, and access to the pre-K program. Then the state national test scores, overall college prep, community service opportunities, student behavior, and personalized education. What we're seeing across the metro and across the state, your bottom 2 are the bottom 2 pretty much everywhere. There is a desire on the personalized education piece. It's seen as a way, if you have concerns on class sizes, to overcome those concerns. So the kid isn't just a number. So the desire for more. But that 22% unfavorable is about 10 points lower than we're seeing elsewhere. On the student behavior, you're about 15 points lower. While it is the second lowest rated, we're seeing somewhere between 35 and 40%. There has been a concern about discipline and behavior, especially in the 7-county metro. Some statements about the district. Vast agreement from 87 to 97%. They feel welcome, accepted, the teachers care, they feel respected, they get help when provided, the district does a good job of informing, meeting individual learning needs, they challenge their student, the school is safe, they support learning at home, and the one that's most difficult is the communicate about progress. That's typically around 20% because there's just a certain group of parents, my wife being one of them, who will never be satisfied with the amount of information they get about the child living at our house. Start school before Labor Day. This is a fun question always. Someday I'll never have to ask this again, just like I'll never have to ask about chickens for city surveys. 50% support school starting before Labor Day, 39% oppose. These are parents. It's a statistical tie, basically, with 12% are unsure. If you look at intensity, surprisingly, this has waned. This was more intense about 10 years ago, where it was like mom, apple pie, and school starting after Labor Day. For parents, it's kind of that strong opposition has started to wane, but it hasn't transferred over to support at this point in time. And then finally, communication. Where are folks getting their information? This one looking at the community green, parents over, or the community blue, parents green. Amongst the community, it's the website and the newsletter at 43% combined. And then followed the word of mouth, local newspaper, social media, email. You can see parents are in an entirely different world for communication. 32% indicate email, 31% the website. Almost 2/3 of parents are relying on one of those two sources as their primary source of information. Now, How do they prefer to receive information? If we look at this print versus electronic, do they want to hold something in their hands? 31% say the mailed newsletter and 11% say the local newspaper. So you have over 40% that want something traditional to be handheld. Very specific demographic over the age of 55. Parents have completely made the transition. So between the email, the website, social media, and an e-newsletter, you have over 75% of parents preferring something electronic. If we fleshed it out a little bit more and asked, do they get a lot of information, some information, not too much or not at all, what's arrayed on this chart is the a lot and the some. And so for the community, it's the website, district mailings, but that goes to first place if we add in the secondary of some. But what goes into second place, if you add the secondary, is the informal discussions with friends and neighbors. The grapevine is alive and lush. You are unique because on this chart, the most credible source, where are folks getting their information? You had 11% indicating that it was word of mouth. The norm on that right now has gone up to 20% over the past 18 months. As newspapers like in Southwest Metro disappear, or newspapers don't cover school districts like they used to, there's a very specific, the grapevine has grown specifically amongst people like me, old guys over the age of 50. We used to read the newspaper. It's not there, not going to go to the website, not going to look at social media. We're going to get together for breakfast and gossip about what's going on. The word of mouth used traditionally was parents, revolving around ECFE, pre-K, athletic associations. It's expanded. You don't have that as a primary. You still have a viable newspaper, unlike other communities that has helped mitigate that. But you can see the impact of the grapevine and amongst parents also. And district employees for parents are a critical piece of the information network that they have, taking it all the way up to third place. So I think across the board, from what I've seen, with districts making comparisons to 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the district's moving in the right direction. The challenge for the district, and it's a good position to be in, because a lot of districts are in the position now where they're going to have to change people's minds. That something they disagree with or they rate unfavorably, they can agree with or rate favorably. You're not in that position. You have the challenge of how do you increase the enthusiasm, the intensity of the agreement of the ratings. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Excuse me.
One thing that Wayne told me, and it's in our financial, comprehensive financial report, is the close-knit community that we have here in the White Bear area of Hugo. And I'm wondering how much of that influences the, statistic, but I don't know how you measure that. But I got to believe that if you're a close-knit community, you're going to have a lot more pride and a lot more touch points with the community schools than you would where you have a higher transient population.
Oh, it's a great question. You're absolutely right. I mean, this community, this entire area is a small town in a suburban oasis.
Right.
It always has been. I did a survey for the city of White Bear Lake last year on housing, and this incredible desire that people want to stay here, whether it's when they move out or they want to have housing available for their kids. So that does bring that connection in. So in that sense, it is more small town than a suburban oasis, shall we say. But we're seeing declines on it everywhere. It really doesn't matter whether You know, there are a few other unique communities in the metro area that I would call the small town in the metro area versus just straight suburban. And even those communities have seen declines.
Declines in the results.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Welcome.
Any other questions?
That's me.
Ms. Thompson?
No, I was just gonna say, it's very interesting, I just love hearing your reports because they're always just fascinating to me. All the questions and the information is very helpful.
Thank you.
I was gonna pretty much say the same thing, and just seeing the data come in, it just shows that things in the district are going the way that we had hoped they would go, and the movement that we've done and the work that is happening here is really seen in the community. So I always appreciate this one and seeing the numbers this year, and then hearing you touch on the comparison between us and other areas is promising and hopeful. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I would love to have these results for other clients I'm going to go talk to that are actually looking at a bond referendum or operating levy like tomorrow night. Not going to be as positive. And they're actually going. So, I mean, it really does speak well of what's happened. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Yes, sorry.
I just have a comment, and that is just to thank our district for these results and to see how we are kind of bouncing back. Is there work to do? Absolutely, but these are very promising. And I appreciate the work that goes into it because I know it's not easy on district staff, our principals, our teachers. I love seeing that as we get closer to those that touch the kids, we get that higher rating. So I just want to thank those that are working in this district to make this happen because it's not been easy.
No, I mean, in 21 and 22, in many districts, it was actually the community was more positive than parents. So you don't have that, and now your parents are, you know, and that's important. That's the constituency, and that also, though, helps build momentum. If your key constituency is talking about it, that helps intensify feelings.
You want to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just kind of reflecting on what Chris said. I just hope the teachers see how favorably they've been rated. I hope they get a chance. I mean, I know it's going to be on the website, it's in our minutes.
Tiffany's probably already sent an email.
I hope you guys- I just don't think they hear enough just how important they are to families and the community, and that their work is appreciated, and the sacrifices and all the things that they do that are unseen by most people, but parents see it, and so it's so great.
Okay. And I just want to say thank you, and I know one of the things, I'm one of those that we won't leave. My family's been here forever, and it's just, this is our home. We've enjoyed the community, we supported school, the school for all my family. A lot of us have come through, so we're really tied to this community, this school, and I think that helps the positivity because it's our home and it's our school, and where we have pride. Go Bears. So thank you.
It's not transient, shall we say, that if I don't like it, I'll just go elsewhere. No, you want to stay here and fix it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Super. Pleasure.
All right, thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much. All right, next on the agenda is B3. It's Lincoln Elementary update. Dr. Gillespie.
Yeah, I will introduce Brian Morris, principal of Lincoln Elementary, and then Christine Belgor, who is the instructional coach there here to share more about their great work there.
Thank you. Dr. Gillespie, Dr. Kazmierczak, board members. My name is Brian Morris. I'm the principal at Lincoln Elementary. Lincoln Elementary, 3 short blocks through the snow that way. And this is Christine Balgord. She is our instructional coach at Lincoln and at Badness Heights Elementary, and a key component in our success. But just, I'm in charge of clicking? Okay. So just to give you a quick snapshot, take a look at the crests. We are, Lincoln Elementary, one of the things that I'm going to talk about is our house system. I am a member of Quantum, House of Respect. Mrs. Belgord is in House Compasio, House of Empathy. And we'll talk about that a bit lately, but it's one of the components of our school. It's one of the ways that we are working towards meeting our strategic goals at Lincoln. As a lot of you know, Lincoln is a vibrant neighborhood school. We're close to downtown, close proximity to White Bear Lake, Bald Eagle, Otter, and Birch. We're known for our commitment to student achievement, our welcoming atmosphere, and active parent involvement, and just a passion to partner with families as we prepare children to reach their hopes and dreams. We have about, well, exactly right now, 470 students served by 56 staff members, and that's all staff. We have 20 class homerooms at Lincoln, 17 in K-5, so that's pretty much 3 classrooms at every grade level, and then 3 classrooms in the Explorations program. Those are multi-age classes of our district-wide gifted and talented program, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The specialist rotation that we offer are PE, music, art, and Spanish. We also have a small but very strong special service cluster, providing emotional and behavior support for students. And like I said, the Explorations program for highly gifted students. Like I said, about 3 classrooms at every grade level. And you know that the staff members, it is just incredible. Not only our teachers, but our skilled and supportive staff in nutrition, playground cafeteria, our paraprofessionals, our custodians, our professionals in student support services. It's a real team, a real student-focused, family-focused team that I am incredibly proud of. Christine was giving me a hard time about rocking it old school with paper. I think the paper is pretty professional up here. It's slowing me down. Okay. I'm just quickly, I mean, you can read it. You've got the board notes. But our mission and our objectives and our strategic tactics, those are mission objectives and tactics that we updated 2 years ago. I really want to point them out because some of the programs or the work that we're doing is really, 2 components are really focused on showing you how we are working towards our strategic tactics. The highlighted things we're going to highlight tonight, one is tiered academic support. So how do we support our kids? How do we work towards that personalized learning experience? Another is our house system. That is our main tool in the tactic of creating a connected culture within our school. And then third, we're going to take a look at the Explorations program. That is a district-wide program that is housed at Lincoln. And also, again, whoops, I was behind a click. There we go. Notice that within our first tactic that will nurture the whole child through a personalized learning experience, that's where you see our tiered academic support, right? That's where you see that how we address equitable access to learning, differentiated learning, and high academic standards. At the beginning of this school year, at the beginning of every school year, all of our schools create academic goals, equity goals, family engagement goals, and social emotional goals for our student. Just to give you a flavor of sort of how we're reaching towards our academic goal, what we're going through right now at Lincoln. Our Lincoln academic goals for all students are that from fall to spring FastBridge screening. So FastBridge is a standardized test system that we use for screening kids fall, winter, and spring. From fall to spring, so beginning of the year to the end of the year, 90% of all Lincoln students will either increase a risk level band or remain in low risk or make sufficient progress towards their IEP goals. And again, it's measured by these tools that are A reading and early reading for the younger grades, A math and early math for the older.
Mr. Morris, just for,
younger
can you
grades.
explain what a risk level band is? for
Yes.
He's on it.
I'm on it. So when we think about risk level, it's the risk of not performing not meeting grade level standards. So if I am high risk of not meeting grade level standards, that's where we don't want to be, right? High risk means there's a good chance that at the end of this school year, I'm not going to meet grade level standards. If we are at low risk, that means there's a small chance I might not make grade level standard, might not perform at grade level standards, but it's a pretty low probability. So we want kids to be in that low risk category, all right? And again, if you think about, so back to sort of what this academic goal means, and I got to get it explained now because when we look at the next slide, it's going to be even more confusing. We want our kids in low risk, we call it the low risk band, or you can think of it as a bucket. We want our bucket of students to be in low risk, or they also have a grouping called advanced that's above that. And we want our kids to be moving up, right? If a student begins the school year high risk, so a student is very probable of not performing at grade level by the end of the school year, there's a big difference between being at high risk and at low risk. But we want that student moving up. Like, student growth is a pre-K to 12 and beyond process, and we want them always growing, and we want accelerated growth. If a student is just growing sort of the same year to year, they're going to stay in a band, right, a risk band. If they are have increased growth, they're going to be moving up in those risk bands. So we want 90% of our students to either move up in a risk band, in other words, become lower risk for performing below grade level, or if they're already at low risk or advanced, we want them to stay there, right? We don't want them dropping down. All right, so think of that idea of swooping up from left to right. When you take a look at the next slide, this graph, all right? Green is low risk, blue is advanced. This year, and this is just a snapshot of our fourth grade. When we talk about our goals, we think about every grade level. Snapshot of our fourth grade students. We began the year with 76% of our fourth grade students in reading at low risk or advanced. So in the green or the blue, where we want them to be at least, all right? So, 76 are starting there. By the end of the school year, we want 90% either there or at least having moved up, went the wrong direction with my hands, having moved up from red to yellow or from yellow to green, all right? So maintaining low risk or moving up in the risk bands. Like I said, we do screening 3 times per year. We just completed our winter screening a week ago. And just again, looking at fourth grade in reading, we began the year with 76% of our fourth graders in the low risk/advanced. At our winter check-in, 82% have moved up in their risk band or remained in low and advanced. And like I said, our goal is 90% by spring. I love this graph, even though it's super confusing, because it shows you where kids are going, all right? If you start at the red, okay? We started the year in fourth grade with 3 students down in the red. 2 of them remain in the red. 1 of them swooped up from red across the yellow and into the green. That's super impressive that student was able to accomplish that. If we look at our yellow, right, that's the some risk. That's sort of a medium range. We had 10 students that started there. Of those 10, 3 moved up, which was great. Of those 10, 2 moved down into the red, which is not what we want to see. That's not the direction our kids should be going. If you look at our green, we started out with 17 in the green, 17 in the low risk, 3 moved up into that blue in advance. We did have 1 move down from the low risk into the some risk, so down from the green into the yellow. But overall, our kids are moving in the right direction. And like I said, by spring, we're shooting for 90% being there. So that's just a snapshot. Just to give you numbers, math is similar but different. We started out with 69% in the low risk and advanced. They are moving up, but right now at winter, we've got 78% in math in 4th grade that have moved up or remained in those risk bands that we want them in. All right, so that's my sort of snapshot of how we progressively measure over the course of the school year how our kids are growing. The next part is what do we do about it, right? Christine is our big what do we do about it person. I gotta click the slide, here we go.
I'm the action girl.
She's the action girl.
Having tiered instruction is not unique to Lincoln. Oh, did you have a question?
I was wondering on the Fast Bridge assessment, is it, I can't remember the terminology for it, is it the same set of questions across the board, or does it go up and down based off of the answers that the students are giving?
It goes up and down based off the answers, so it adjusts.
It's really determining growth.
Right, it's determining sort of where you are. So if you get the first problem wrong, it's going to say, well, let's try maybe something a little bit easier and see how she does on that. If you get the first problem right, let's see, and that's a simplified version of it, but it'll, let's challenge her more to see where she's really at. So it really narrows in on that. Yep.
Thanks.
So having a tiered plan isn't unique to Lincoln, but it's something we really are focusing on this year because we want to hit that goal of having all of our students show growth. And so just to kind of go over what the tiers mean, a tier 1 is all of our students, no matter who you are or what your needs are. We consider everyone tier 1, and everyone gets what we call our core instruction. And then some students we call tier 2, and there are some students that they need some additional small group instruction in order to show some progress. And then we have a few students who need tier 3, which are some additional, more intensive instruction. And so what we're doing this year at Lincoln is we just finished up all this Fast Bridge testing with the data guy, just went over it with you. And last week during our PD day, all the grade levels did some data-driven dialogue. And they looked at their grade level data and they figured out which students were tier 2, some risk, not reaching the year-end grade level standards, and which students were tier 3, high risk for not reaching the year-end grade level standards. And so then this week, we are going to meet as grade level teams, and we are going to look at now some diagnostic data that they have given their students to figure out why they're not reading at the level we would expect them to read. And we're going to analyze all this data about each of these individual students and come up with a plan for instruction so that we can get these students to make this progress and hit this goal that we have as a collective group of Lincoln staff for them. And so we're going to progress monitor, and every 6 weeks we're going to come back as a group and just keep talking about these kids and not letting anyone forget about them because they are important. And we're going to make sure we work together to get them to hit the goal.
Awesome. Thank you. And Christine is really the person who organizes, especially not so much the identifying who needs support, but the what to do about it part, right? She is our specialist in coaching the staff and to supporting the kids with sort of that differentiated, personalized instruction. All right, so, and again, these tiered systems, this data review is done similarly at all of our schools. I just thought, A, a little bit of a deep dive into what's going on right now, and B, it's what's on our heads right now, so it's easiest to present about the thing that's sort of most, the biggest thing that we're doing at the moment. The next part that I wanted to, so that's an example of one of the ways that we're working towards our tactic 1. Our tactic 2 is to create a connected community within our school, and we are doing a lot of work with that through what we call our house system. Our house system is based on a system, a man named Roy Clark had created this idea at a school, I forget where the school is, but we have a teacher who had traveled to this school, Roy Clark, where they have really looked at a way to make everybody feel like they belong, not just to a large school, like 470 kids is a lot of kids, not just to a classroom, but to belong to a larger group within the school, and within that larger group, a smaller group. So we are organized into houses, and like I said, there are 5 of them, and you know, like I said, at its core is to create a connected culture. Our overall goal is to increase and strengthen student-adult relationships and student-to-student relationships sort of across all grade levels. If you think about a student in an elementary school, like the number 1 adult for that student is the teacher. And then you have, you know, I have connection with all the kids in the school, but I'm like a second-tier guy, right? I'm the principal, I have a lower level than the teacher with all of them, but some students have the reading specialist as another teacher that's big in their life. Every student in the school has the PE teacher, the music teacher, the art teacher, the Spanish teacher as being an adult in their life. When we create the houses, now these children also have the other adults in their house. So I have, you know, I spend more time with kids in Quantum than I do with kids across the building. And within each of these houses, we have a house family. So I have a house family that's, well, next slide, then we'll go back to this one. The giant house family selfie. My face is bigger than everybody else's, but they are more important than me. I was just holding the camera. But that's just a snapshot of my and Leah Armstrong. She's a 5th grade teacher, our house family within Quantum. That house family has done, we do a family service project or growth activity every quarter. We also have a whole school house assembly every quarter. But just this idea, so this snapshot was last year. Each of our families made those cool knot blankets for Serenity, for the senior center. We've also packed snack bags for kids at other schools. This year we also, for Serenity, we created sort of a holiday gift candle for adults at Serenity and one other adult care facility. But just that idea that these kids are building these relationships both vertically with students across grade level. They're having more adults that are like their adult, trusted adult contact, we think is going to really bring that connected culture to Lincoln that we hope to gain. And then the third piece that I wanted to speak to was the Explorations program. I don't have this in my notes. The Explorations program has been part of White Bear Schools for 10 years, I think since 2015. It's a program for highly gifted students from every school and some open enrollment students. This year and last year as well, we have 3 mixed grade classrooms. Right now, I think we have 74 kids across the 3 classrooms. The Explorations program has an accelerated curriculum. So for instance, in math, everybody is at least 1 grade level up. We have instruction that is tailored to the gifted learner. A lot of our learning, especially around literacy and social studies, are around themed explorations. We have things like Exploration Academy, where students have opportunities to explore areas of their interest. We have, it's a monthly makerspace. This next slide, just our Explorations program does a lot of their learning, and especially history learning, in White Bear. So you will see them going to farmers market on Fridays when the weather's nice. You will see them, here traveling to City Hall to learn about city government. You will see them traveling to the History Center or the Historic House in downtown White Bear to learn more about, not just their passions, but also sort of their place, learning more about the community and their place in the community. And that's what I think is really one of the strengths of the Explorations program, and it feeds nicely off the fact that we are so close to downtown. But like I said, it is a district-wide sort of a school within a school. We do provide bus service for students from anywhere within the district. And it's a great program to serve a portion of our student population that really needs to be pushed in ways that sometimes can be difficult in your general classroom. That is it. Questions thank you for listening, and questions that people have.
The Explorations program, are they also part of the house system?
Yes. Yep. So,
I know at least from my understanding, the Explorations program used to be invited into, so the parents can either opt in, opt out.
Correct.
Do you know what the factors are, what they're looking at when those letters are sent out to
you mean like how we decide who we invite? It's based on an assessment called the COGAT, the Cognitive Assessment Test. I think that's what it stands for. So we administer all second graders the COGAT. So everyone gets screened. So it's a program that is not just teacher recommendation by any means, right? So everyone is screened using the COGAT, and then a second component, an achievement component is how students in second grade have achieved on their A reading and A math, so that FastBridge assessment. And then the third is the LISSE, and I don't know what LISSE stands for, but it's a teacher assessment or a teacher survey in how self-directed a student might be, sort of outside of the box creative thinking, things along those lines. So take those three components, put them into a formula, right? And then we essentially invite about the top 5% of students that are in those categories, are using those three tools. Usually we invite about 40 to 45 students to start in third grade, and in 20 to 25 decide that that's the right choice for their kids. And yeah, it's a very strong program that's been strong for years. We've had, it has in the past sort of flopped back and forth between 2 classrooms and 3. We've been at 3 for 2 years now, and I hope that's where we stay. About, kids in the 70 to 80 kids would be great.
One other thing with, I love the information on growth because I think that tells a much better story than what people normally hear, which is just the 56%, at grade level, and I think the growth tells a much more intricate story. What I would like to see is, what I think would be even more helpful would be to follow the cohorts through. Because just seeing one snapshot of a year really doesn't tell you anything other than just that 1 year. It would be really helpful to see that same group over a series of years.
And that's
what does the high risk go up? Does it continue to go down over that couple of years for the same cohort?
Right.
Or I think that information could be really helpful as well.
Yeah, and that's, my goal.
And I know you guys are looking at it.
Right,
in terms
and my
of
goal
what
is just to
we're
give
looking
you
at
sort
it,
of a snapshot of what the work looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that is something we look at, like, and we, students take a FastBridge assessment every year from kindergarten through 5th grade, so that we can identify what their needs are in real time in any given year, and how are they growing over that, that entire 6-year span of elementary school.
It's a great thing because you can do interventions real time as opposed to a lot of the standardized tests where you don't know until
After the fact.
After the fact.
Yep.
So there's nothing you can do until basically a year later.
Right. Yeah.
Jen and I will bring some more overall data to all of you, and I can't remember the exact meeting, but we're working on that with the screening and trying really hard to get better and better and making sure that we're looping you in. So we'll make a note and see what we can get for that.
Ms. Dracoji?
So, one, I love that your mission statement says that you nurture the mind, body, and hearts of your kids, so thank you for that. Can you share just how you determine your interventions? Is that determined at
Yeah.
the district level? How is that training done? Like, is it-
So as a district, actually, we've been doing a lot of work on kind of aligning our interventions and making sure and doing some learning on what type of interventions are appropriate, especially, do you know that we have a new literacy? Yes. And so we've also done all this learning with letters. And we know that our students need an aligned experience, and they've been a part of a really great team where we have taken a look at our new literacy and all of this learning we've done with letters, and we are coming up with, as a district, an intervention plan for these tier 2 and tier 3, so that our students are going to get learning that is, when they leave their classroom, it's not going to be new learning, because we know that they're going to learn best when, oh, I've been doing something very similar in my classroom with my teacher. And so we have a really great team working on that, and those are the things I'm using with the teachers that I work with, so that they can get a head start on those things. I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say, letters is, for people that maybe don't know, student outreach is looking at letters. Letters is what approach to teaching
Nice.
reading.
And it's not spelled right.
It's not spelled correctly, yeah.
It's not, but for
Cute
people in
name.
the community, it's not just, you're not looking at letters. I'm saying you're looking at the strategies you use to teach reading as defined by READ-ACT and many other great research things that we, anyway, that wasn't a question. That was a comment. But I was going to ask you a question, Christine. When you're looking at all the data-driven discussions and drilling it down to individualized students, which parents really appreciate having individualized instruction for their children, especially struggling children. How is that impacting when you finally feel that you need to make a referral to special education? I'm guessing that you're referring to kids that are the right kids that might need more instruction in that area that qualify for those kinds of special services. So, I mean, so you're not, you're working with kids a lot before they get to that point, right? So maybe the kids are the right kids that end up then qualifying for special education. I just thought you should comment on that, being a former special education teacher.
Yes. So actually, this year is when we've really had all these tools in place, the curriculum resources and some of these other diagnostic tools. And this fall, we started really using them, and we had some referrals, and we're like, let's wait, let's see the progress that we make. And 2 of these students, they moved up and showed us that they're not having these concerns anymore, because what we've done is showing that they're making the progress.
So you're getting the right instruction, and they're basically maybe not having
They're not showing the
a
need
learning
anymore.
disability or some other category of
Right.
special education.
Right, it was, they just needed the
Need
right
the right
instruction. They're not showing a disability
Yeah,
in those 2 situations.
yeah.
So what the work we did showed that intervention was appropriate, and it wasn't necessary for a referral.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Lloyd?
This actually might be a question more for Allison. I'm just wondering in terms of the teacher training for letters. It obviously seems to be working in the cases that we've been presented with. How have we made sure that it's been, how have we made sure the fidelity of the program is across all schools and all teachers? Because, I mean, it goes up and down based on who buys into it, who's got their own way of doing things. And
Yeah, we're working really hard on that. So LETRS is the professional development in the science of reading. And so really, it's a 2-year process. 95% of our K-5 teachers have completed it. So this would be their first year that they're not also doing LETRS training, really is the sole focus for our professional development.
Is there an assessment? I mean, that 2-year process, that's kind of my issue with the fidelity of it, is because you're going through 2 years worth of training. How do we know at the end of that 2 years of training that they know their stuff,
Yeah, no,
they're rolling with it?
I get the question. The 2 years is really intense learning. I mean, it is, like, teachers almost have a process because they haven't learned this way of teaching literacy in teacher education programs of like almost mourning, like this is how I taught before, how do I grow in that? So that's the focus. Meanwhile, we also adopted a new curriculum. And so between all of that, we have an instructional leadership group, our district instructional leadership group with elementary, which includes teacher leaders, principals, instructional coaches, and they talk about how are we observing and really looking at that fidelity. And so they're working, I'm not going to remember the statistics, but they're really working on how are we making sure that this is happening, not just hoping that this happens, but diving into it. And so they talk about we're doing walkthroughs. I have walked through many classrooms with that. And so you're really partnering with teachers and educators to say, where is it difficult? How are we aligning the curriculum? And so we're knee deep in that right now. And really that's our focus. How do you go to deep implementation so that we take out the variability? A huge thing that's helping our educators is looking at that data. So when we look across the board, we look at different schools, we look at different grade levels, but people to say what's going on for first grade, second grade, how do we come together because maybe we're seeing faster growth in one area. And so all of that is, when you think of system change, we have been very aggressive and people have leaned in and we have people, I'm so proud of the work that we've done, but you're in the middle. So you're asking the questions that we too are asking, and then how do you partner together around that?
So are the teachers, are they working together by grade level within the schools? They like obviously they normally do, but are they also working across?
Yes, I feel like I'm stealing all the thunder. Jen is a huge part of all of this, but the
Either
principals who are
answer
here.
any questions at any time.
So I want to hear that this is like a huge team effort, but yes, we have elementary communities of practice that meet every single professional development day, and each grade level across our whole district, every single grade comes together, and that's led through professional development around curriculum implementation with a principal and an instructional coach. And so when you think about, it's amazing to see what they do on those days and diving in, and that was a need that people identified. Not only do we need time in our buildings, but we need to do vertical. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah.
One more question, go ahead.
Very quick, Brian.
Yes.
I just wondered, how do you find the time for the houses to meet? I mean, when do you carve out time on the busy school day for houses across grade levels?
That's an excellent question. And it's a hard balance, right? So here's a tactic that is going to build a culture of learning and sort of collaboration within our school, this community. But that's not something that's easily measured. That's not something you're going to see on our MDE report card and all that, right? And so here's something we feel is very important that is going to affect academics, affect our students' long-term growth, hopefully well beyond our school. But we have to find time for it. So that balance between, yes, this is super important, but no, we can't do it every day. So that's, like I said, we have one all-school assembly per quarter. That's about 30 minutes, and one 30 to 40-minute house family meeting per quarter. So yeah, and it's really hard, and that's, when we have conversations, there are some staff that would like more of it, and sometimes we have to push back on that. And but really, and it's also doing things that we've been doing in the past, but now in the context of houses. So for instance, we don't have a student council anymore. We have heads of houses that are sort of our student leaders within the building. I know that we've got February is it's Black History Month, and it's also, why am I blanking on the name? I Love to Read Month. And our reading tallies all have to do with reading enough to earn a star that goes on the outside of your house family door, right? This is something that's happening outside of class, but it's building that community within inside the school. But that is a hard thing. Like we cannot go whole hog into something that might take away too much from our academic time. So it's a balance.
All right. Oh, one more, sorry.
I'm just saying, I'm Dan Scar, I'm a new board member. I just wanted to introduce myself and say thank you for the meaningful report. I understood it actually, so that was a good thing.
It's a win.
The other thing is, I noticed that you use Latin for your crest. Does that mean you want to become like a Latin immersion school? You probably won't get a lot of people there.
No, and would you know enough Latin to say that that really is, or is that, I don't know, is that just like fake Latin? I don't know the answer.
Fighting is a real Latin.
Fighting is, okay, well then, yes, we are White Bear's new Latin immersion school. But, yeah, no, I got a few Latin phrases, and none of them are good.
Well, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you for coming by. All right, next on our agenda is B4. Dr. Gillespie, you want to introduce?
Yeah, as John's coming up here, I will introduce John Leininger, who's the principal at Matoska International School. I would just like to give our elementary principals, thank you, shout out. They've been at work since 7 o'clock this morning, so thank you for being here so late.
Absolutely, thanks for having me. Thanks for sticking around. I don't know if I'm last, but I kind of want to just say everything Mr. Morris said, like ditto, because then I just call it good. No, I appreciate you having me, taking the time. I'm John Leininger, principal at Matoska International. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Starr. Thank you for that introduction. I've seen you around. It's nice to hear. So there's a lot to share about Matoska. I'm really excited about it. I am not going to be able to get to everything about Matoska, but I'm sure I'm going to enthrall you, and you're going to want to stay, and we can talk afterwards. But we'll get this through so the people who have families can get home. Do I push the down arrow here? Okay, a little delay. Arrow right. Gotcha. There we are, Matoska. So this is our mission statement. I'm not going to read through it, but our mission statement comes out of the strategic planning process, which was done a few years ago and then redone as well. And it's something that I really appreciated about that process is it wasn't a top-down approach. It was about our families and communities articulating what they wanted in their schools, our teachers saying this is what's important. As we saw in our previous presentation, our families are highly involved. Our families really want to be involved. They care about their schools. They love their schools. They love their teachers. And so as part of this process, we work with our the Matoska families, our PTO members, members in the community, not necessarily even part of the PTO, and our teachers, and we say, what is it about the school that you attend that you want and are hope for? I should probably take a small step back. For some people who are not familiar, Matoska, we are in the south end of the school district near Century College. We're primarily a choice school, so families in White Bear Lake get to choose to come to us. We have a small attendance area, as we used to say, like if you can throw a baseball in a backyard, we want to make sure that you are able to come to us. But we're excited that we can draw those families right in our neighborhood, but as well, most of our families choose to come here and join us at Matoska International. And so our families said that learning is important. They said that having a developmentally appropriate teaching and learning, using research-based strategies. Our family said it was important to recognize and validate and have a deeper understanding of each child's cultural and personal identities. Our family said that we wanted a commitment to establish and nurture strong relationships within our learning communities. Our family said they wanted to provide safe, supportive environment through equitable practices. And our family said that we wanted to encourage students and staff agency through meaningful interactions. So from there, then we developed our strategic objectives. And I think of note here, you'll notice they're bullet pointed, they're not numbered. They're not in an order of importance, they're not as one is more important. These are things that our teachers and families and community said, all of these things are important. But we know that we want each child to feel welcome, safe, and appreciated for who they are. It was important that 100% of our students demonstrate individualized growth in their learning. 100% of the students are prepared for future learning, And then each student makes a positive impact within the school and broader community. And a little bit as I was listening to Mr. Morris and Lincoln, it's really about growth. It's really about getting each child to that next step, finding out what are their needs, what are their hopes and dreams, what do they need in mathematics, what do they need in reading, and then helping us get them to that next level. So many of the things that they talked about are very similar with our intervention program, with how we identify the students, we identify what their needs are, and then how we can meet those students where they're at and get them to the next. As I sometimes say, like I have 2 children of my own at home. One of them was an early walker, one was a late walker, one of them is not exceptionally gifted, one of them is not developmentally delayed. We know children grow in leaps and bursts and spurts, and our job is to find out where are you at, and what is that next step that you need to get to your next learning. So we set some goals around those strategic objectives. We know that we are, we're in a constant state of improvement. I hear a lot, and for better or for worse, and I apologize, but pandemic was a point in time that was really difficult. We had many students and came. Many of them did exceptionally well. Many of those families and students, they struggled, and so we were all over the place. And we are in that process of building back in our data, and I'll share some of that data in a minute. We're showing really good success in that growth. So we decided that we needed to spread our academic goals in that fast-bridge reading, as you heard Mr. Morris talk about, into 2 parts, because we knew we needed to get to our 80%, but we needed to make sure that our goal was challenging, but also reasonably attainable. So in the first year, we're going to get to 74%. We'll be at that low risk, as Mr. Morris talked about in our fast-bridge reading, and then 80% by the next year. We also want to collect and are collecting and analyzing data that to the extent that students feel safe, valued, engaged, and connected at school. We know one of the best indicators to a child's success is being connected and engaged in school. And one of those things is, have we asked our children, are you connected? Are you engaged? Let's talk to the people who are actually here, talk to our clients, and ask, are you engaged in school? Then we also know that relationship is huge, and that relates directly to that engagement, which is our relationship with our families and our historically marginalized families are so important to learning. And we saw that again with our slides before, like our families trust us. We need to keep them engaged. We need to keep our families engaged. Not all of our families are always engaged, and it's a part of our job is to reach out and say, hey, we want to help your child learn. We want you to feel welcome. We want you to know what's going on at school. Let us help your children get to school, to get that academic achievement, to make it, make yourself propel forward. So the primary focus, we have been in that letters training. We are part of that small percentage that is in year 2. So our teachers are in that second year of that letters training. Again, it's a very intensive program. Teachers say it's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding. It's fun to see teachers learning. They are educators at their hearts. They love to learn. They love to know more. What's also exciting is when you hear things like, our world is changing, and what we know about learning is changing. We shouldn't be stuck at some point in time. We need to, as we constantly learn about new ways to teach, new ways to engage kids, and how our brains are working, it's just incredibly valuable. So our teachers, while they know it's a lot of work, they are highly engaged in it and are appreciative of it. And then we are also in that our second year of the CKLA Amplify, our new literacy curriculum. What's exciting about that is last year was our first year. It was a really good year. With any first year, there is a lot of learning that goes on. Now, it's like, okay, as we are going through our units, we're going through our knowledge units, we're just like, okay, I remember this, I get this, I can figure this out. And our teachers, it's hard to explain, but that learning curve is super exciting. How it's like the wheels are just moving in wonderful ways. So by the numbers, I promised you some numbers, how are we doing? So when we talked about the FastBridge specifically, there's a number of different sections within the FastBridge suite, the CBM benchmark. When we looked at our numbers through the course of the year last year, every grade level increased, moving from moving into that lower risk category. Everybody is growing. Every grade level is moving the right direction. And not only moving the correct direction on every grade level, on average, 11.2% increase at each level. So we are not just maintaining, but we are growing on average about 11.2%, moving towards that goal. So more kids are getting into that low risk at a very high rate. And so when I think about our goals that we were talking about before, we really should be able to achieve that, but we will see. In our student survey, 99.4% feel that their teachers care about them, 96.1% feel connected to their classmates, 89.6% feel comfortable talking to an adult about things that bother them. Again, trying to build that relationship and connection. Relationships and connections are going to really help our students achieve in their reading, writing, and math, that we need them engaged in school. And then as well, the family and parent engagement is important. And each team held this year a family engagement event. And that was, I had a lot of hopes for that, and it exceeded that. And one of the things that we think about with schools is that as I talked a lot about those relationships, but having relationships with families is really important. And we noticed in our previous presentation, there was some conversations about behavior, right? Concerns about behavior. And one of the beliefs and one of the things that we know is that if we have a good relationship with our parents, when we have a problem or challenge, and we call them up and you have a positive relationship, that parent is going to be like, on it. Let me help you out, because I know that the school is there to help my child out. My teacher wants my child to learn. I'm going to help out. So we're going to build this positive, connected relationship. So all of those things we're seeing as we build those relationships, improving our student academic achievement. They all go together. So what's in our future? We're not doing Latin immersion, although that would be really cool. But we are doing our Spanish dual immersion. We are excited. I know we had a board presentation earlier. We are well on our way to doing that. There's a lot. One of the things, I've been in White Bear for quite a while, and I was at a recent conversation with Mr. Wald, and it's like, one of the things I've always loved about White Bear Lake, because I've been here a long time, and if you know me as a personality, I'm a risk taker. I will go anywhere, do anything. People are like, why are you still in White Bear Lake? It's like, it's because every turn, White Bear Lake has provided a challenge, an opportunity to learn, to grow, to excel. So just when I'm thinking, well, I'm going to just coast out of here in 5 years, they're like, immersion. I'm like, awesome. Let's do it. Let's figure this out. So you can tell I'm kind of excited. So we're bringing immersion to Matoska, to Otter Lake, and to Matoska. The enrollment started. Gangbusters. I don't know how to describe it. 75 students are already enrolled at Matoska International, both for our English and our Spanish. They're about half and half. But if you think about that, we are 75, which is about 75% of our facility, and it's like we are just at the end of January. We are doing really well with bringing students in. When we talk about bringing immersion, it's really important. We first talk about a great kindergarten experience. And as I've toured families for English, as I've toured families for Spanish, the common denominator really is we want a great experience for our kindergartner. And it's like, absolutely. And so our Spanish track and our English track, that's going to be our first and foremost as we move forward. The other thing we talk about, at Matoska is like we are one school, like White Bear Lake, we're one school. So it's not going to be us and them. It's not the Spanish or the English. It's Matoska. It is White Bear Lake. And it just so happens that we are getting our instruction and curriculum based on the language that those families choose and want to have for their children. It's like, we are happy to serve the families that this is what you want. We can provide this for you. So where we're at, our design team, thanks to Jen, is working hard, and Ayan is over there in the background. We have to make sure to recognize the work that she's doing, working on the curriculum, alignment, scope and sequence, trainings, professional development. Our administration team is working on staffing. And one of the things that I really enjoy, and it has been fun about the staffing part, because if you've heard much about immersion schools, staffing is one of those things that really come up. And what we're finding out is people want to come to White Bear Lake. People want to work in White Bear Lake. It's a testament to who we are as a community, to our schools, when educators are saying, I want to go work there. So lots to be proud of there. All right, so this is where I get to be a risk taker. A few, in our immersion presentation not long ago before the holidays, my colleague at the high school shared an awesome morning announcements that they do videotape, and their high school students put them together. It's pretty polished. We do video announcements at Matoska. I get to do them, and I'm going to get a chance to share one, but I have to put a couple little asterisks there because it's just not a, high budget production. I do 172 of them, and they've got to get done. And the kids always say, I see your mouth moving, because we do puppet shows. I was like, yeah, it's me with the puppets. But the evolution is kind of fun because, I'm not sure how many of you remember from elementary school. Do anybody remember the principal's morning announcements? That was just never the highlight, right? My wife talks about, remember hearing that she had a library book on, back in the day. It's like, well, we don't do that. No one's listening to the principal. So, okay, we're going to then get the principal on the screen. We're going to come to the 21st century. It is still the principal doing this. And so as part of some of our curriculum, we had puppets in our second step curriculum. There were puppets, and then we've added puppets to it. And now Principal John Leininger gets to share part of their curriculum message from our second step curriculum, and we bring in puppets. So I'm going to finish, bear with me, with a 3-minute morning announcement, the B quality. Matoska students and staff, this is Principal John Leininger with your morning announcements. It is Monday. We are ready for a great week, and we are looking forward to getting a lot done. As we usually do on Monday, we think about our week ahead. We can think about what we're going to be learning, all the great things that we can do to engage our learning. So I want everyone to be thinking about not only what you're going to be learning, but what are the best ways that you can do that. So much of it is about listening, following directions, engaging in your learning, which means eyes watching, ears listening, all of those things that we know help us learn. Speaking of good things here at Matoska, we have Bear Paws here, good things happening. I wanted to give a shout out here to Luca. Luca was a leader when he helped out the sub. Hey, thanks for being a leader, and thanks for being a helper. We love those helper. We have a shout out here to Ramsey in kindergarten. Waited for a friend to go out to recess. Hey, way to be a great, compassionate friend. Friends are awesome, and we treat our friends well. That is really wonderful. And lastly, we shout out here to Prince Jaden in first grade, who had a super day, helping classmates, being an awesome leader, and caring for others. Nicely done, Jaden. We are so proud of all of you. That concludes our announcements for today. So we want to say thanks. We'll see you all in the hall.
Oh, we've been talking so much about our feelings and emotions. Yeah, this is really important to talk about. I have a funny question. I sometimes don't understand, what's the difference between being sad and being worried? Oh, that's really a tough one. Sad and worried are a lot alike. Yeah, they sure are. But it's not that hard to understand. Just think about that pizza. Oh, I don't want to think about the pizza. Love the pizza flop. Yeah, the pizza flop. You were pretty sad. Oh, I was so sad. My pizza flopped and it was on the ground and I wanted to eat it. I just was sad. I lost my pizza. Yeah, that's sad. But when you're worried is when you're thinking about something that might happen in the future. I'm going to drop my pizza again. Oh, no. Yeah, that's when you're worried that you're going to drop your pizza again, but that's okay. You can make a plan. A plan? Yeah, you can make a plan. So, next time you have pizza, you can, carry your pizza with 2 hands. A plan. I'll carry my pizza with 2 hands. and then you can set it on the table and sit carefully so it won't fall up. I'll sit at the table with 2 hands facing forward, and then it won't fall down. Oh, that's helpful. Now I don't have to be worried about my pizza flop. Yeah, it's sometimes tricky, but always make a plan if you're worried. And if you need help, you can ask your teacher or friends or parents or anyone who help you make a plan. Oh, good idea. Make a plan. Bye. Bye.
Thank you for allowing me to be a risk taker. Thank you for letting me share about Matoska. I'm happy
Do we
to.
have any quick questions? Because I know that we have to stop at 8, or we have to make a vote if we go past 8, so.
Do your fifth graders enjoy this as much as the kindergartners?
Yeah, we have a variety as well, and then we also, in our Bear Paws, it happened to draw some of those things, but we also draw for academic things, kids that are learning something, say, well, what are you learning? So we want to acknowledge, like, hey, they learned their math last year.
Other questions?
I just want to say kudos on your 11% increase, 11+% increase on your FastBridge results. And what else I was going to point out, just the way that you're honoring every student through your mission and your daily interactions, and also the importance of social emotional learning and helping kids learn how to cope with everyday situations. So your participation matters, and it's good to see you. Thanks for everything that you're doing. Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
Letters training. I just want to make sure, because I've pointed this out before, but I want to make sure that I say it again, that the statute, I think, was that folks started getting trained this year, and 95% of our teachers are done. So that's a big, huge deal. We are way ahead of many districts across the metro and across the state. So thank you, and I know you had a lot to do with that, so thank you.
I was going to say thank you for your years of enthusiasm, years of enthusiasm, and all the things that you're taking on. We should send you to the ventriloquist school in spare time. When you're not doing them 13 or 14-hour days.
To teach me.
Sesame Street has a class.
Yes, any final words? Thank you for coming.
Thank you
know, I
everyone.
like chocolates.
Thanks for helping us out.
So if chocolate bars are coming up for sales again, let me know.
They are.
Okay.
As of today, actually, your timing is good.
Okay,
Mr.
so
Arquette.
I'll reach out.
We'll be giving you a call.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we have one more agenda item. We have C1, Mr. Wald.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Arquette. Earlier this evening, or maybe about a lifetime ago, we heard from Jim Eichten, from the district's auditing firm, MMKR. He presented audit for fiscal year 23-24. That's the next step in the annual process of the audit is for the school board to accept the report. And so the recommended action is for the school board to accept the fiscal year audit report as presented.
So in front of us, we have the recommended action to accept the fiscal year 23-24 audit report. Somebody like to make a motion? Ms. Thompson, do I have a second?
Second.
By Stripe OG. All right, any discussion? Go ahead.
I probably have to abstain just because it wasn't on my watch, even though I had a lot of questions.
Okay. Any other questions? I mean, this is a vice vote.
This is a roll call.
Roll call? Okay. So this will be a roll call, so I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Star?
Abstain.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, that's-
Dreykoji?
Aye.
Thompson? Aye. Arkin?
Aye.
Beloit? Aye. Daniels? Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're finally to the point of the agenda. So would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Chair Arquette, Dr. Arquette, I make a motion.
Okay, Thompson, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All right, this is a voice vote. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we are adjourned.